Peter Bergman. Peter Bergman, an alias for a man whose true identity remains unknown, is a tragic enigma. His seemingly difficult life came to an abrupt and unexplainable end in the hours leading up to June 16, 2009, leaving investigators and the public alike grasping for answers in a sea of evidence that only deepens the mystery. This examination aims to provide a more concrete understanding of the unknown individual known as Peter Bergman, delving into the puzzling details of his life leading up to his discovery on Roses Point Beach. Unlike most cold cases, where detectives search for a victim with a clear identity or history, Bergman's case is unique due to the absence of such a background, making it an especially perplexing and peculiar investigation. Rather than trying to solve a case involving a victim whose life was taken by an unknown assailant, or someone who vanished without a trace, the investigation focuses on piecing together the life of a person whose mystery began before it even started. Consequently, the usual profile of a victim is nearly non-existent, leaving only unreliable eyewitness reports and speculative characterizations. It is widely accepted that while Peter Bergman ended up in Ireland, he was likely not originally from the country. Most theories point to him being a visitor from either Germany or Austria. His surname, although resembling the traditional German, Bergman, was spelled with an additional N at the beginning, a subtle but significant variation. Unfortunately, this is the only clue regarding his identity, as Bergman never provided any formal identification to clarify his true origins or legal name. A few individuals who encountered Peter Bergman suggested that he spoke with either an Austrian or German accent, with one taxi driver confidently recalling that Peter had admitted to being of Austrian descent. While this could be part of a deliberate ruse, given the immense uncertainty surrounding the case, it provides a vague hint about his background prior to his fateful walk along Roses Point. Moreover, eyewitnesses who saw Peter in his final days emphasized that he maintained a professional appearance even until his last sighting on the night of June 15. Several beachgoers recalled seeing him wading in shallow water, his trousers rolled up to his knees, yet still wearing formal attire. CCTV footage corroborated these accounts, consistently showing him dressed in a black jacket, chinos slacks, and black shoes. His shoulder bag also suggested someone of a higher social standing, and the apparent availability of cash indicated that he may have come from a background of some wealth. While it's possible that this appearance was a deliberate attempt to mislead, it seems likely that Peter Bergman was a well-kept, respected individual wherever he came from. However, the autopsy findings confirmed a far darker reality. Peter was gravely ill. The medical examiner discovered that he had terminal prostate cancer, which had spread to his lungs and bones. Although Peter may not have been fully aware of the severity of his condition, his deteriorating health was undeniable. Peter Bergman's cause of death was ultimately determined to be a heart attack, not drowning. His organs were already failing, with the medical examiner estimating that he was likely only weeks away from death due to his terminal prostate cancer. While heart issues certainly contributed to his decline, it is possible that Peter was aware of his imminent fate. The realization that one's end is drawing near can bring about overwhelming emotions, a sense of isolation, or even a desire to retreat from the world. Peter's sickness, and perhaps the emotional turmoil it caused, may have contributed to his decision to disappear, or at least to leave behind any identifiable trace of his life. For those who knew Peter, his disappearance may have been a sad but understandable result of his deteriorating health, but for the rest of the world, his anonymous fate is a tragic mystery. No matter his origins or the toll that cancer had taken on his body and mind, Peter Bergman remains a person with a story deserving of recognition. His life, marked by anonymity and confusion, should not end with his final, untold chapter. Those who may be seeking closure about him deserve answers, starting from his first known appearance on Friday, June 12, 2009, in Derry Island, between 2:30 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It was there that he was first seen at the Ulster bus depot, a tall, thin man with glasses and short gray hair. Peter Bergman, dressed in a black leather jacket, carried two notable items: a soft hold bag by the straps and a carry-on stealth bag slung over his shoulder. At 6:28 p.m., about 2 hours after being spotted in Derry Island, He was captured exiting a bus at the Sligo bus station in Sligo Island. Shortly thereafter, he caught a cab to find lodging, asking the driver for a budget-friendly option. The first attempt was at the Crushkin Land guest house on Connolly Street, but there were no vacancies. They then traveled to Key Street, where Peter left the vehicle at the Sligo City Hotel. At 6:52 p.m., CCTV footage showed Peter entering the lobby of the Sligo City Hotel, where he checked in, paying in cash for a single occupancy room with breakfast for £65. Despite the fact that he provided no identification, he used the alias, Peter Bergman, for the first time during this interaction. The hotel staff had no issues and assigned him room 705. Throughout the following 24 hours and the weekend, Peter was seen numerous times in the hotel's CCTV footage, exiting the hotel with purple plastic bags containing unknown items. He was never recorded disposing of the contents of these bags, and was seen returning to the hotel empty-handed on 13 separate occasions. This strange behavior continued throughout the weekend, with one such instance occurring on Saturday morning at 10:49 a.m. Peter walks into the General Post Office in Sligo and purchases 8 stamps. When considering the price of stamps in 2009, a 55p stamp would have provided local delivery in Ireland. Peter's 82p stamps are expensive enough to allow delivery anywhere in the world, with the idea the stamps were used on regular envelopes. The fate of the stamps is unknown from this point forward. The following day on Sunday, June 14th between 11 and 11:30 a.m., Peter leaves Sligo City Hotel and hails another taxi cab. He is met by driver, Gerald Higgins, who claims Peter is chatty, carries a map, and withholds a gold tooth in the back of his mouth. Peter asks Jared about a quiet beach in the area for swimming, and Jared recommends Roses Point Beach. The two men drive around. Jared shows off the beach and drops Peter back off at the bus station. Another day passes by and Monday, June 15th arrives, what would later be proven to be the final day of Peter Bergman's mysterious journey across Ireland. At 1:06 in the afternoon, Peter checks out the Sligo City Hotel and returns the 705-room key. He walks out in a pale blue long-sleeve shirt, black trousers and a black jacket. He carries the same 2 black bags he carried in on June 12th plus one more purple plastic bag. A half hour later, around 1:30 p.m., CCTV captures Peter arriving at the bus station, sans the black hole all back. At 1:38 p.m., Peter orders a sandwich and cappuccino from the bus station cafe. He eats his meal without speaking to anyone else, but is seen writing something on a piece of paper. He reads whatever it is he wrote, tears up the slip and throws it away in a nearby trash can. Somewhere over the next 40 minutes, Peter runs into Vincent Dunbar, the depot inspector at the Sligo bus station, and asks him about the daily bus routes. Vincent gives him the information for the Roses Point schedule, but finds Peter to be dressed quite odd for a trip to the waterside, saying he looked like he was on his way to meet someone for business. Then at 2:40 p.m., Peter boards one of the 3 buses in service to Roses Point Beach. The bus drops off Peter and other passengers at around 3 p.m. outside Yates Country Hotel. Peter avoids the building and heads to the beach. 1 hour later at 4 p.m., Peter is spotted by a beachgoer hanging around with a black carry-on bag slung over his shoulder. Fast forward another hour, at 5 p.m., Peter is seen by more passers-by at the Yacht Club, a section of Roses Point referred to as First Beach by the locals. Evening turns to dusk and at 9:10 p.m., 2 women have a visual of Peter and claim he is carrying something discreet and unidentifiable. 20 minutes go by and at 9:30 p.m., there's another sighting of Peter, this one by couple, Diamond and Paula Laith, as they watch the sunset. They make out a tall, thin man with his trousers rolled up to his knees meandering around the beach as the sun sets, and casts him in a shadowy silhouette as he crosses their line of sight. Diamond Lehigh says it seems like the man is performing a sort of bizarre ritual, intentional in his movements from right to left as if he has never waded through shallow water. About an hour later at 10:30 p.m., Peter is seen once more still with a plastic bag, this time wearing his glasses. A similar sighting was reported a half hour later, 11 p.m., and again in 10 minutes as someone claims to spot Peter sitting on a beach overlooking First Beach at 11:10 p.m. Just before the clock strikes midnight at 11:50, Peter is seen alive for the final time walking along the shore, a plastic bag in hand only 30 minutes away from high tide. The next morning at 6:45 a.m., early riser runners, Arthur and Brian Kinsella, stumble upon a lifeless body on a slipway at the beach near some rock formations. They quickly realize the dire situation and call authorities. They say a prayer as they wait for police and medical personnel to arrive. The police show up on scene and at 8:10 a.m. on Tuesday, June 16th, Dr. McGowan pronounces Peter Bergman dead. Over the next 5 months and the better part of a decade, investigators search endlessly for a scrap of evidence or supplemental clue to help pinpoint the identity of the man who washed up on Roses Point Beach. They scour the timeline of those few days in June to pick up on a scent, to scrape whatever hint they can out of a dry, empty case file. While theories are built, sorted and tossed out, one thing remains true: Peter Bergman has a past, a mystery unlike most cases Sligo Island and the world at large has ever grappled with. In a surge that bore very little fruit in solving Peter Bergman's missing identity, there is one key artifact worthy of closer inspection. That while it still asks more questions than proves answers, it at least gives us something to chew on and analyze rather than blindly assume. Throughout the 3 days Peter spent in Sligo Island, CCTV cameras both around the hotel and downtown Sligo recorded Peter seemingly live a normal stay at a normal lodging. He kept to himself, but was apparently polite, calm, and professional. However, as the weekend pressed on, CCTV began capturing a strange action by Peter, one that makes little sense on a first viewing. As Peter went in and out of the hotel and meandered around Sligo, he carried with him a purple plastic bag, obviously filled yet unfortunately too covered to be discerned. The cameras picked up this uncharacteristic errand 13 times in all, each time giving a visual of Peter walking out of the hotel. Yet in a weird twist, CCTV was never able to follow Peter to his probable multiple destinations. Thus, the fate of the purple bags and the mysterious contents was never decided. Some believe Peter had a single purple bag and simply folded it up and stuck it in his pocket before returning. Some believe Peter had a premeditated stock of bags with a specific amount of things he wanted to distribute or throw away around the city. So what could have exactly been in those purple sacks? Police believe it was personal items belonging to Peter, a generalized term without much meaning. Other amateur sleuths think the purple bags may have contained contraband and required multiple trips to effectively separate whatever Peter was getting rid of, such as drugs or something more sinister. Whatever it was, we can all agree that Peter did not want these contents to be found. He avoided CCTV at each final destination, a clear indication Peter knew where the cameras were and where he could go without being tracked. He was careful and calculated, making the footage of Peter carrying those plastic bags around Sligo not only a major case point, but a haunting, surreal viewing experience. When attempting to put together the pieces of Peter Bergman's puzzle, the biggest question remains: who was the unidentified man? While it can be safely concluded Peter was of Austrian descent judging by his alias and accent, the rest is as good as coded. Some theorists believe the man claiming to be Peter Bergman was a German or Austrian government agent on the run and hoping to escape his past in Ireland. Others wonder if Peter was a criminal on the run. A few think Peter could have simply been an old dying man seeking peace before certain death. The biggest mystery without the mystery of Peter's ethnicity is the address he left at Sligo City's hotel front desk while checking in. The location was Einstedersen 154, 4472 Vienna, Austria. However, when investigators mapped out the area, they found the address doesn't actually exist and the nearest coordinates led them to a vacant lot in Vienna. So where did Peter get the idea to leave such a weird, non-existent place of residence? Obviously, he could have just made it up on the spot using a random sequence of names and numbers. Yet some followers of the case think there is more meaning to the address. They think the numbers could be correct, but maybe that the street name was faked. Others believe the address did exist at one point and played a role in whatever life Peter Bergman was living, and because it was torn down or removed, He could use it quickly from the top of his head and be confident that it wouldn't trace back to his true identity. How else would someone know something so specific to Austria if they weren't familiar with the area beforehand? It's an odd addition to the Peter Bergman puzzle and may have no significance at all. On the flip side, it's quite possible Peter wasn't German or Austrian at all. Investigators point to the immense amounts of planning that seemed to go into the entire ordeal and figure Peter's specificity in choosing his name could have been to tie him with a fake accent disguise himself even further. This would put authorities on a wild goose chase throughout Europe looking closer at German area residents. Austria or not, Peter Bergman was a man with intention, with a plan, and an unparalleled execution. The other important questions to consider: why was Peter carrying out such an extensive, effective plan, and what exactly was that plan? The easy answer is Peter was accepting his fatal illness on his own terms and taking the steps to exit on his own volition. Followers of the case trying to make sense of everything believe Peter probably had family and friends strong in their faith that he would survive rather than accepting his mortality. Thus, to ease their inevitable stubbornness, he fled wherever he lived and said goodbye from afar, which in his eyes was the easiest way to do it. This would explain the stamps brought to the post office and the likely letters mailed out from Sligo. They could have been wills or other end-of-life documents meant for his relatives or personal confidential explanations as to what he was planning. However, this theory doesn't give much of an explanation as to why he was dropping off what were probably personal belongings around Sligo purposefully out of sight from eyewitnesses and designed to avoid the Murad cameras recording all around the town. If Peter simply wanted to run off to die peacefully, why would he go through such measures to rid himself of whatever he had with him? He simply could have left them where he came from or dumped all of them off at once in a permanent fashion. Instead, these items were hidden to continue keeping his identity an enigma. One theory regarding the purple plastic bags and the removal of his personal things is that Peter had committed a crime, and whatever was in those 13 bags were incriminating pieces of evidence to that crime or set of crimes. Whether it be weapons, drugs, or even money from a criminal cash-out, those bags could have been contraband. This theory would fit in nicely with the fact that Peter intentionally avoided CCTV during his purple bag missions, so that police and investigators would never find the evidence that convicted him of whatever crime he might have committed. Sligo was probably far out enough from wherever the crime took place to be a safe zone for evidence release, hence why Peter chose such a random location. Other theories question if Peter's potential criminal works ran deeper than petty theft or murder, and if he was part of a bigger organization or governmental system. This would explain his in-depth knowledge of security systems and how to avoid identification. Maybe Peter was running away from certain capture and had only a few days to rid himself of all the physical connections he had to his old life. Maybe Peter was being hunted by his own government and had limited time to say goodbye. Some even suggest Peter wasn't running away at all, but rather was meeting a comrade or co-worker at various points around Sligo or headed to Rose's Point to meet someone possibly with the enemy or a contact with his agency that was meant to end all his relationships with the crooked company. After all, the Sligo bus station depot inspector mentioned Peter looked as if he was dressed to meet with someone. Of course, these types of sinister theories are weakened by the fact that Peter Bergman didn't even die from drowning. The official autopsy of Peter's corpse found he had died of cardiac arrest, not from drowning or foul play. Thus, if Peter had met trouble in Sligo or was running away from an enemy, he wasn't killed by such a figure. While it's possible the surprise appearance of a threatening contact could have spurred a heart attack, there were zero eyewitness accounts of a second figure roaming around Rose's Point the night of Peter's death, nor did the countless citizens who remember seeing the tall, thin man mention him talking with anyone. Rather, they mention how carefree he was keeping to himself and seemingly unaware of his surroundings. This certainly does not sound like a man looking over his shoulder running away from imminent danger. So why did Peter die of a heart attack? The theories aren't probably far from the truth on this one. He was obviously a very sick man whether he knew it or not. A body can only withstand so much, and a widespread cancer to bones and internal organs would weaken the immune system enough to allow an already damaged heart to go into arrest at a slight stressor such as high tide at midnight in a foreign location. Because Peter was found in clothes varying from the clothes he was last seen wearing, it's likely he went swimming when the beach vacated. And if he got caught in a panic out in the water, he could have died prior to succumbing to the sea and eventually was washed ashore as high tide subsided. Like all mysteries, there are plenty of holes in the theories surrounding Peter Bergman. While the entire situation in Sligo seemed calculated, Peter probably wasn't brilliant enough to be part of some secret organization or government agent. For example, if he had planned his route so perfectly and amortitiously, why would he have taken a taxi to somewhere cheap to stay when he arrived, when he was within walking distance from hotels from both the train and bus station? It's not like Sligo City Hotel has anything special to offer, and Peter asked too many questions about the location that wouldn't make sense if he had actually scoped it out prior to visiting. Could it have all been part of the plan, playing dumb, acting like an elderly tourist to full townsfolk and the hotel staff? Sure, but Peter also left behind DNA and sets of fingerprints, two things he would have never allowed had he been trained to enter and leave like an invisible man. And to further suggest, Peter Bergman was most likely a nobody compared to a criminal. These DNA and fingerprint findings bore zero matches in any country, in any law enforcement system. With all the theories, the confusion and the complete lack of answers, one thing is for sure, intentionally or not, Peter Bergman's final days threw both investigators and amateur sleuths for a loop, leaving us second guessing the guesses, building a hypothesis for death of somebody no one even knows. It's a task meant for no human mind to process. Before we divulge our hypothesis of Peter Bergman's unsolved identity, we want to make known our conclusions are purely logical speculation based on evidence, circumstantial and factual subtext. We are only privy to the same information presented in each video, and we do not promise certainty or an expert guarantee on the findings we reach in closing. We simply observe, research, and report. After considering the mixture of premeditated resources and innocent ignorance, we believe Peter Bergman was a man simply wanting peace to go out on his own terms, away from family, in his own way, to prevent heartbreak or controversy. Sadly, that's exactly what he ended up doing after leaving behind an accidental bevy of circumstantial clues that makes his plea for anonymity a puzzling mystery that has escalated from local newsstands to international media. We believe Peter brought with him everything that could trace him back to his old life in a physical sense, and that is what he was distributing in the purple plastic bags transferred from the black bag he carried when he arrived at the hotel. We can't say for certain if the fact that CCTV never actually caught him disposing of such items was on purpose, but it's just as likely it was a coincidence that it was calculated. The stamps at the post office were probably bought to send a few letters to those he wished to disclose his final moments with, possibly sending a will to a lawyer, but overall avoiding evidence to allow police to identify him post-mortem and therefore share his death with the rest of the world. In reflecting on Peter Bergman's final day at Roses Point Beach, it's possible that he sought solace in the water, perhaps as a way to find peace in the twilight of his life. His movements, wandering alone, could symbolize a man facing his mortality, uncertain of how to reconcile his final moments, or seeking rest without worry. There was a certain serenity in his presence, as if he were lost in his own thoughts, detached from the world around him. Throughout his time in Sligo, Peter seemed to embody a peaceful sense of being adrift, his actions appearing neutral, relaxed, and even almost serendipitous. Could Peter have entered the water on the night of June 16th with the intention of never returning? It remains unclear. It's possible that he entered the water and succumbed to cardiac arrest as the waves overwhelmed him, or perhaps he slipped and panicked when the tide came in, leading to a heart attack. While it's tempting to consider suicide as a cause, his death seems more a result of his deteriorating body rather than an intentional end. It's possible that Peter, aware of his condition, simply wanted to experience freedom in his final moments, wading into the water in search of a fleeting moment of joy, a final act of peace before his body failed him. Ultimately, Peter's death and the mystery surrounding his identity should be treated with sensitivity and care. Behind the unknown man, there is likely a family, people who are mourning a lost father, husband, or friend, waiting for answers and closure. For them, Peter Bergman's story represents the aching hope that one day, they may bring their loved one home. His death may have left them with no resolution, but for all we know, They are living in the shadow of his absence, yearning for the closure that still eludes them. It is for this very reason that we strive to share Peter Bergman's story with the world, hoping that someone, somewhere, might hold a piece of the puzzle that could finally shed light on his identity. A decade has passed since Peter's lifeless body washed ashore at Rose's Point, and in the early morning light, Arthur and Brian Kinsella said the Lord's Prayer over him. For those who have followed this peculiar and tragic case, these 10 years have been filled with confusion and unanswered questions. Yet, it's never too late to put a name to the face, a real name that carries significance across generations. As human beings, we place so much importance on our identities and the sense of self. When we encounter someone without either, it forces us into a paradox of unknowing, leaving us with a deep sense of loss and incomprehension. We hope that someone with vital information will step forward, helping to piece together the mystery of Peter Bergman, the John Doe of Rose's Point Beach, so that he may finally be identified and his story can be shared with the world. Moving on to the next case. Morgan Nick. Arkansas, a state known for its stunning landscapes, including mountains, rivers, and hot springs, is a place that often seems like a paradise. But like any location that appears perfect, it also harbors a dark side. One such tragic story is that of Morgan Nick, a bright, warm, and loving little girl from Ozark, Arkansas. Born on September 12, 1988, Morgan was the eldest of 3 children. Described by her parents as a shy girl with a love for cats, she adopted her first kitten, Emily, from a local shelter in 1995. The two were inseparable, with Emily often sleeping beside Morgan at night. Morgan was also an active member of the Girl Scouts, enjoying indoor activities. Though she wasn't entirely sure what career path she would pursue, she often dreamed of becoming either a circus performer or a doctor, sometimes even both. However, Morgan's dreams would never come to fruition. On the evening of June 9, 1995, she and her mother, Colleen, attended a Little League baseball game in Alma, Arkansas, after being invited by a family friend. Around 10:30 p.m., as the game was winding down, Morgan grew restless. When 2 of her friends asked if she wanted to catch fireflies with them, she eagerly sought her mother's permission. Initially, Colleen said no, but she eventually relented, frequently checking on the children as they played nearby. 15 minutes later at 10:45 p.m., the game ended. Colleen spotted the 2 children who'd been playing with Morgan but not the little girl herself. The children said she was emptying the sand from her shoes over at Colleen's car, a Nissan Stanza. This was the last time that Morgan was seen alive, as when her mother approached the car, she found her daughter missing. Terrified, Colleen spoke to the local coaches who questioned the other children further. They remembered seeing a man they described as creepy watching them earlier on, explaining that he was with a red pickup truck. They said that he'd spoken to Morgan earlier. The car was seen leaving at around the time the 6-year-old was last seen. When the police arrived on the scene, a huge manhunt for the missing girl was launched. Around 300 people were in attendance at the Little League game, which helped to provide police with multiple witnesses, some who saw the man and some who saw Morgan at her mother's car. The children told authorities that the unidentified man had spoken to them all and asked them questions, but the nature of this conversation has never been released to the public. The FBI quickly got involved with the case, providing resources and manpower to the Alma Police Department. A sketch and description of the unknown man was released. In 1995, he was described as being between 38 years old, 6 foot tall and 8 pound 180. He was wearing blue denim shorts, no shirts or shoes, and had black or salt and pepper hair. He is also noted to have had a quote hillbilly accent, combed back hair that could possibly have been curly with a mustache, 3 or 4 days of beard growth, and a hairy chest. His car was described as being a dull red older pickup truck with a white camper shell and rear damage on the passenger side. It is believed to have had Arkansas plates. His composite sketch resulted in over 4,000 tips. Morgan's disappearance is thought to have been linked with 2 other attempted abductions around the same time. On the morning of June 9th, a 4-year-old was pulled into a truck outside of a laundromat, but her mother managed to get her back. Then on June 10th, A 9-year-old was forced into a men's restroom at a convenience store in Fort Smith, 10 miles away. Luckily, the girl was able to escape. In both cases, the reported abductor and his vehicle were described as being similar to those in Morgan's case. Fortunately, police have not been short of leads, and there have been countless sightings of Morgan across the U.S. However, law enforcement has had no luck in locating the young girl or identifying her abductor. Even 2 decades later, Morgan's case continues to receive tips on a regular basis, something which the Armor Police have noted is rare in older cases. On January 5, 2002, police received a tip that was so specific, they felt they had to investigate. It indicated that Morgan was buried in an area of private land in Boonville. They also used a dog in the search, but when it ended at 9:30 p.m., police decided not to return, having recovered nothing from the site. Then in November of 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Spiro, Oklahoma, looking for DNA evidence that could show Morgan was once inside the house. The following month, they returned to this location to conduct a further search after receiving a tip. Cadaver dogs alerted them to a well on the property, which was the center of the investigation. But no evidence of Morgan's presence was ever found, and the search was eventually called off. Then in August of 2012, 2 previously convicted felons, Tonia Smith and James Monhart, were arrested for computer fraud after attempting to utilize the 6-year-old's identity. While they are not believed to be connected to the case, the most recent update in Morgan Nick's disappearance came in 2017 when authorities searched a property belonging to a man who had been a person of interest from the beginning. The man is now in jail on unrelated charges but has refused to discuss Morgan's case. If Morgan is still alive today, she would be 32 years old. A docuseries about her disappearance is currently in the works, and her parents continue to hold out hope that one day they will have answers and be reunited with her. Anyone with information regarding Morgan's disappearance is encouraged to contact the Alma Police Department at 479-632-3333. Moving on to the next case. Jean Tuggy, a 60-year-old woman from Pine Grove Mills, Pennsylvania, was found dead in her home on January 21, 2016. She had been shot twice with a 9mm pistol, and it was clear that her death was not a suicide. Nothing had been stolen from her home, and no evidence was left behind. The initial investigation did not provide any significant leads. However, investigators recently uncovered new information that could help move the case forward. They discovered that Jean had formed a friendship with one of her coworkers, Christopher Kowalski, who had developed romantic feelings for her. Investigators also learned that at the time her life taken, he owned a 9mm pistol. He sold it and moved to South Carolina. Investigators located the owner of the pistol, and after examination of the weapon, it was determined that the pistol was most likely the same one used to take Jean's life. Investigators then went to South Carolina to interview Kowalski. He immediately confessed and admitted he is responsible. He was then taken to Pennsylvania to be prosecuted. It had not been revealed yet why he did what he did. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro had this to say: "Thanks to the diligent efforts of the lawyers, investigators, and fellow members of law enforcement who never gave up on this case. The arrest of Christopher Kowalski is the first step towards putting him behind bars. The Tuggy family has waited too long for justice, but we hope this helps them heal." Moving on to the next case. Jasmine Featherstone. In June 2020, the remains of an unidentified woman were discovered in Elizabeth, New Jersey, near the railroad tracks on the 300 block of Port Avenue. Investigators quickly responded to the scene and transported the body for an autopsy. The results revealed that the woman had been murdered. She was identified as a black woman, likely between the ages of 25 and 35 at the time of her death. She stood around 5 feet 6 inches tall and weighed between 125 to 140 pounds. The woman had short hair and double piercings in both ears. A forensic sketch was created and shared with the public in the hopes of identifying her, but despite extensive efforts, investigators were unable to determine her identity. She became known as Union County Jane Doe 2020, with no significant leads coming forward to solve her case. Details of the woman's unidentified person case were entered into the National and Unidentified Missing Person System. In March 2023, 3 years after the discovery of the woman's remains, the Union County Prosecutor's Office partnered with Othraming to determine if advanced DNA testing could help provide an identity for the woman or a close relative. The Union County Prosecutor's Office Forensic Laboratory submitted forensic evidence to Othram's laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas. Othram's scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to build a comprehensive DNA profile for the woman. Othram's in-house genetic genealogy team used the DNA profile in a genealogical search to provide investigative leads that were returned to investigators. Using these leads, detectives were able to narrow down the search and identify the victim as Jasmine Featherstone of Elizabeth, New Jersey. Jasmine was 23 years old at the time her life was ended and previously lived in Middletown, Connecticut. The identification was announced in June 2023. The investigation into what exactly happened to Jasmine is still ongoing by investigators. Anyone with information about the case is urged to call the Union County Prosecutor's Office and speak to Sergeant Lamar Hartfield at 908-451-1873. Tips can be submitted anonymously by phone at 908,654 tips. If you provide a tip that leads to an indictment and conviction, you are eligible for a reward of up to $10,000. Moving on to the next case. Nova Welsh. Nova Welsh was born in Jamaica in June 1957 into a supportive and caring family. When she was 10 years old, her family moved to the United Kingdom in search of a better life. At 16, she began a relationship with a boyfriend and soon moved in with him after becoming pregnant with their first child. The couple eventually had 2 children, Jonathan and Leah. They resided in a 3-story apartment on Lighthorn Avenue in Ladywood, Birmingham. Osmond Bell, Nova's partner and the father of her children, was a violent man, and frequent arguments between them were common. Those who were close to Nova knew about the dysfunctional and abusive nature of her relationship with Osmond. She had confided in her sister, Valerie Welsh, that Osmond would occasionally hit her, and neighbors who lived beneath them reported hearing constant shouting and fights. Over time, Nova grew increasingly unhappy with living with Osmond, and her once strong feelings of love for him faded, overshadowed by his ongoing abuse. Nova Welsh eventually found new love and began dating a man named Wayne Newby. Like in any typical relationship, Wayne often visited Nova at her apartment, but Osmond Bell disapproved of another man in the picture, causing more tension between the couple. Their constant arguments grew worse, particularly over Nova's late-night outings. According to Nova's stepsister, Sonia, the couple had a heated dispute one evening. Sonia, hearing screams, went into the kitchen to check what was happening and found a frightened Nova and an enraged Osmond, who had a dishcloth wrapped around his hands. Sensing the escalating tension, Sonia decided to call the police, even though Osmond had tried to stop her. When the police arrived, Nova did not file a formal complaint against Osmond. She explained to the officers that they had been arguing, and she wanted him to leave. In early July 1981, Osmond Bell finally left the apartment, which was in Nova's name. His outburst likely stemmed from his inability to tolerate seeing another man in his space, making him feel emasculated. While all this was unfolding, Nova Welsh's family had relocated to the United States, hoping that she and her 2 children would join them soon. Loved by all, Nova easily made new connections with both family and friends. She was outspoken and often confided in her friends about the troubles in her relationship. She once told her friend, Joan Campbell, that Osmond Bell had strangled her so tightly around the neck that it hurt, and she showed another friend, Pauline Davies, the bruises left on her skin. Nova explained that Osmond had attempted to strangle her because she had gone out at night. After he left, Osmond began sending her threatening letters, telling her that if he couldn't have her, no one could. One of these letters even included a threat to kill her, stating, "If you don't have me back, you know what I will have to do." Nova decided to sever all ties with him, and shifted her focus to her new relationship with Wayne Newby. However, on July 27, 1981, Nova suddenly stopped answering her phone. Her mother, Lorna Welsh, had tried to call her from the United States to confirm when she would be coming to join the family, but the 24-year-old mother of two wouldn't pick her calls and had disappeared with no trace. Her friends were equally surprised about her sudden disappearance because it was very unlike her to leave without informing anyone. According to her friends, before her disappearance, she had dropped off her two children with her ex-lover, Osmond Bell, and had gone out dancing with her new boyfriend Wayne Newby and a group of friends. She returned that evening but appeared upset. Neighbors said that they had heard crying and fighting coming from Nova's apartment on the day she disappeared. They felt it was a usual occurrence, as her ex-lover was known to be violent and abusive. Weeks went by without a word from Nova. Her mother became even more distressed that she couldn't get a hold of her daughter. Nova Welsh didn't show up at her job where she worked as a part-time cleaner. Her disappearance was getting worrisome to everybody around her. So, 2 weeks later, on August 9, 1981, her best friend reported her missing to the police. The police then came into her apartment to search for clues that could have led to her disappearance. While they were investigating her case, Osmond Bell was interviewed by the police. He knew she was missing but never reported it to the police, claiming that he thought she had ran away with her new boyfriend or visited her family in the United States. His explanation seemed logical enough, and without evidence, the police were forced to release him. The search for Nova continued. On August 12, 1981, friend Lorna Edmond received an anonymous letter saying that the author's boyfriend had seen Nova and the same guy she had been out with night before grabbed her and hit her. The writer was implying that Wayne Newby had something to do with Nova Welsh's disappearance. The police investigated the letter and still had no clue on what had happened to Nova Welsh. The forensics determined the letter to be truly written by a female. The police, who had interviewed Wayne Newby before, called him in for another round of interrogation. He still maintained that he had nothing to do with Nova Welsh's disappearance. On August 18, 1981, there was a shocking discovery made in the flat where Nova Welsh lived. Neighbors reported an awful smell coming from somewhere in Nova's apartment. When the maintenance team came around to search the apartment, a strong smell pulled them towards the stairs. Just beneath it, they discovered a utility cupboard, and in it lies Nova's decomposed body, covered in a blanket and newspapers. Nova Welsh, whom the police and the public had been looking for, was in her apartment, dead and rotting away. According to her autopsy results, Nova had suffered from a broken neck which led to her death. Her death came as a shock to everyone in her community. Her family in Miami was informed about the discovery, and they were so sad and heartbroken. In a bid to find the perpetrator of this evil act, the police started their investigation. The first suspect that came to mind was Osmond Bell. He was then arrested and held in custody for 4 days while the police did their initial investigation. The issue of the letter Lorna Edmond had received was brought up, and the police asked Osmond Bell if he knew anything about the author of the letter. He, however, denied it. Due to lack of sufficient evidence to link Osmond Bell to the killing, they were forced to release him again. The police did all they could to find Nova Welsh's murderer, but all efforts was in vain. After a while, the case went cold for 35 years. In 2016, when there was a significant advancement in DNA technology, detectives from the Cold Case Department were going through cold cases. They became particularly focused and hopeful in Nova Welsh's case. Her file contained a piece of chewing gum that was used to close secure the cupboard door of where her body had been found, and also, there was the letter that had been sent to Lorna Edmond. Having taken the evidence to a crime lab, they found out that the DNA on the chewing gum is the same as the DNA on the seal of the letter. After that, they got a court order to secure DNA from the initial suspects in 1981. DNA was taken and compared with that of the chewing gum and letter. Fortunately, there was a match. He was then arrested and had his trial started in at the court. Witnesses took their stand, citing his abusive nature and the letters he had written to Nova Welsh threatening to kill her if she left him. Nova Welsh's neighbors, Carmen and Wendell Turner, who lived in the flat below, had heard what appeared to be the cupboard door being forcibly shut on the night Nova Welsh disappeared on July 26, 1981, at around 12:30 a.m. In the early hours of the next day, Carmen and Wendell Turner heard two bangs. They said the second bang sounded like somebody was kicking the door. Carmen said the noise could have come from the cupboard. The prosecution of the case argued that despite finding out that Nova Welsh was missing, Osmond Bell never reported to the police because he is the killer. He further mentioned that the letter and the seal of the envelope was taken for testing for DNA, and it matched with that of Osmond Bell. The prosecution said he sealed the envelope to divert suspicion onto Wayne Newby, which it did at the time. However, Osmond Bell had a different opinion to that, saying his DNA must have appeared on the letter when he touched it while being subjected to a dark and terrible interrogation in the days after Nova Welsh's body was found. He claimed that during a break in police interviews, he was left alone in the room where he had been allowed to touch and read the letter. When asked by his attorney, Jeremy Dine, if he had ever been in the cupboard where Nova Welsh's body was found, he said he had been there up to 3 times while running a business cupboard with his business partner and his brother. He said in court, "The very first time we went in was to gain access to the pipe. We were going to attach a hose to the stopcock." He further claimed to have used a discarded piece of gum as a form of filler in order to secure the door after he had forced it open. He said he had secured the cupboard by using the screws that were there and also used the chewing gum in place of glue. To him, all these explains why his DNA was found on the letter and chewing gum. Osmond Bell fervently denied killing Nova Welsh. In his words, he said, "We had 2 wonderful children, and, although we had our differences towards the end, you do have feelings for the mother of your children." The prosecutor, who wasn't buying Osmond Bell's lies, said it's a 1,000,000,000 chance of the DNA not matching Osmond Bell. He is the man that tampered with the lock on the cupboard door and hid the body there. It would be an extreme coincidence if the killer was somebody other than Osmond Bell. However, after a long 6 weeks trial, the court determined that the murder had not been premeditated. The judge said Osmond Bell got into a fit of rage when he found out that Nova Welsh was seeing another man. Some people seemed to disagree with the judge, citing letters Osmond had written to Nova Welsh, threatening to kill her if she left him. They concluded that it was indeed premeditated. Regardless, Osmond Bell was cleared of murder but was convicted of manslaughter by an 11-1 majority verdict at the Birmingham Crown Court. He was then sentenced to 12 years in prison. The judge said he would serve half of his time in prison and the other half on license. Nova Welsh's family and friends are happy for the eventual justice and closure they now have. Nova Welsh's sister, Valerie Welsh, said the family had forgiven her sister's killer. In her words, "To be honest, my family and we forgive him, but he still need to pay for what he done." Lorna Edmond, Nova's best friend, said, "Nova was a lovely person, always happy and smiling. She was a devoted mother who loved her 2 boys very much. I often think about the old times and the things we used to do. I still miss Nova and only hope that her family can now find some peace. Nova can rest in peace knowing that justice has been done. I will never forget her. Until we meet again, Nova. Love, your friend Lorna." Nova's mother, Lorna Welsh, expressed. After 36 long years, Nova can finally rest in peace. The family can now find closure, knowing that the person who took Nova's life has been held accountable. I sincerely thank everyone involved in bringing this case to court. In her victim impact statement, Lorna Welsh described Nova as gentle, loving, and full of life, and she mourned the tragic loss that robbed her of the chance to see her children grow into young adults. Many cold cases are now being solved, giving families of murder victims a glimmer of hope. We hope that those responsible for such heinous acts are brought to justice before they are allowed to escape accountability. What are your thoughts on this case? Moving on to the next case. Billy Fainer. Billy Fainer, only 22 years old, went missing under mysterious circumstances. Originally from Brooklyn, Billy had become involved in trouble, prompting his parents to send him to a horse ranch in California owned by a former neighbor in 1984. They hoped the move would distance him from bad influences. Billy worked and lived there for a while, but by late 1984 and into 1985, he disappeared without a trace, leaving his family unaware of what had happened to him. On October 27, 1985, a father and son were walking on a ranch in Parker County, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, searching for a potential location to build a new home. During their walk, they stumbled upon skeletonized remains. The remains were buried in a shallow grave, partially covered by foliage and disturbed by animals. Authorities were notified immediately. The remains were believed to belong to someone between the ages of 15 and 20, and the victim had been shot to death. His clothes, including a pair of gas blue jeans and a Union Bay white fleece jacket, were found scattered around the area. Despite the presence of clothing, no identification was found at the scene. Sheriff's deputies began checking missing persons reports but couldn't find anyone matching the description. The victim was given the name of John Parker Doe. Years would go by and the case grew cold. Over the years, authorities tried everything from facial reconstruction, DNA phenotyping, and genealogical testing to try and identify the young victim. In 2018, DNA was extracted and sent to Paraben Nano Labs to determine the victim's characteristics, which were previously unknown. Through DNA phenotyping, John Parker Doe was finally given a face. He had fair skin, brown or hazel eyes, brown or black hair, zero or few freckles, and was of European ancestry. This disputed their earlier assumptions that the victim was of mixed race. With the new information, a more accurate 3D facial reconstruction was made, but it still did not generate any leads. Before I continue, I want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now let's move on with the video. CC Moore from Paraben Nano Labs uploaded the victim's DNA to GEDmatch, and over the next 18 months, 100 of hours were spent to try and find any relative of John Parker Doe. Soon, they found a potential first and second cousin. However, the cousins were found to be adopted and did not know their biological family. The genealogists then tried to find biological parents of the adoptees to be able to find some lead for John Parker Doe eventually. They were able to find a possible birth father of one of the adoptees, but they couldn't confirm it through DNA as the man was already deceased. Fortunately, one of the man's biological sons agreed to take a DNA test, and it was uploaded to GEDmatch. In a breakthrough, it was found that he was the first cousin to John Parker Doe. CC Moore then built a family tree and searched for a male between the ages of 15-20 that had gone missing. She found one name in the New York Birth Index that seemed like it could be a match. No records were available for him after he entered his early 20s. His name was Billy Feiner. Authorities soon tracked down Billy's parents, who were living in Florida. The family provided a DNA sample, and a DNA test confirmed that the victim indeed was Billy Feukner. Hurricane Sandy had destroyed all the photos from when Billy lived in Brooklyn, but his family was able to provide a photo from grade school. Determined to find answers, investigators tracked down people who had worked with Billy on the California ranch. It was found that while working at the ranch, Billy met a man named Forrest Ethington, who lived in the Dallas area. Forrest convinced Billy to join him and travel to Texas, where they would perform several robberies. The pair pulled some heists together in Texas, and then Billy decided to fly solo. However, Billy got caught and was set to go to court for the robbery. This worried Forrest because Billy might turn on him and reveal his robberies as well. Forrest then told the witness that he was going to try to kill Billy to silence him. Forrest then went to a remote part of the Texas ranch and shot Billy once in the back of the head. Detectives were prepared to charge Forrest with Billy's murder, but in January 2020, they discovered that Forrest had already passed away. After Billy's death, Forrest had been involved in a botched heist at a coin shop in Pontiac, Texas. During the robbery, one of Forrest's crew members killed the shop owner. The FBI apprehended Forrest after he attempted to sell the stolen coins at a coin show. Forrest was sentenced to 5 years in prison for the crime but appealed in 1991. In 2010, he was arrested again, this time for aggravated assault against a person under 18. Forrest died in prison in October 2019. Billy's disappearance and murder were finally resolved after 35 years. Though Billy's family did not receive the justice they had hoped for, they were able to gain the closure they so deeply needed. Moving on to the next case. Janita Phillips. In 1986, a sanitation worker in Greenwich, Connecticut discovered the body of a newborn baby boy in his truck after emptying a dumpster. An autopsy revealed that the baby had been strangled and was less than a day old. Investigators spoke with local residents in an attempt to identify the parents, but were unable to gather any useful leads. At the time, DNA technology was still in its early stages and insufficient to trace relatives. However, in 2019, investigators from the Greenwich Police Department revisited the case. They used genetic genealogy to analyze the DNA sample they had collected from the baby. This method led them to a woman they believed to be the mother. Following the lead, they traveled to a house in Lake Mary, Florida, where the woman was believed to be residing. Investigators collected items from the trash and recycling bins outside her home, and through DNA analysis, confirmed that the woman was indeed the baby's mother. The woman is 62-year-old Janita Phillips. Investigators decided to interview her. She then confessed. Janita said that she kept the pregnancy a secret to everyone. She gave birth to a baby boy in her apartment, strangled him, and then left him in a bag in the dumpster outside the building in Greenwich, Connecticut. Court documents show that back in 1986, Janita was interviewed, but then she denied any knowledge of what had happened and refused to take a blood test. In Janita's statement to the police, she wrote that she knew her husband did not want any more kids and had big dreams of becoming a fashion designer. I didn't want to crash his dreams and fall down the rabbit hole of having a bunch of kids and stuck with bills and not being able to care for them or get to achieve his dreams, reads the statement in part. DNA has also confirmed that Janita's husband is the father of the baby boy. According to her, he had no knowledge of what she did. Attorney Lindy Urso, who was representing Janita, expressed that her client is deeply remorseful about the events of that time in her life. According to Urso, Janita has moved past the trauma and lived a fulfilling life since then. She's never been arrested before and has raised a family, been married, and worked steadily for 30 years in the same industry. It's curious, however, that Lindy Urso seems to downplay the gravity of what happened. The situation takes on an ironic twist when it's revealed that Janita was caught because the DNA she unknowingly left in the trash was matched to the baby she abandoned. Moving on to the next case. Phoenix Colden. Phoenix Colden was a curious, energetic, and musically gifted young woman. Her passion for her faith and her artistic abilities were tragically interrupted by her mysterious disappearance in December 2011, leaving everyone who knew her, both personally and through online communities, searching for answers in a sea of evidence. This is an exploration of Phoenix Colden's disappearance and the mystery surrounding the 900 block of St. Clair Avenue. Phoenix was born on May 23, 1988, to parents Gloria and Lawrence Colden. After spending part of her childhood in sunny California, Lawrence's work relocated the family to the greater St. Louis, Missouri area, where they would remain. The Coldens settled in the residential neighborhood of Spanish Lake, a quiet, middle-class suburb, where Gloria and Lawrence dedicated themselves to raising their bright and cherished daughter. Phoenix grew up in a household grounded in church and Christian values. Her parents closely monitored her behavior and social interactions, ensuring she remained kind, compassionate, and respectful. Alongside these values, Phoenix developed a deep love for music and a natural talent for playing instruments. Every Saturday morning, she would practice on the family's piano, quickly falling in love with the craft and using it as a means to express herself. Phoenix spent more time at home once she entered middle school. After her parents decided that homeschooling would be a better fit than public school, Phoenix adapted without complaint. Although this decision sheltered her from a world beyond what she was used to, she never minded. Her passion for learning and academics was unmatched, and she excelled in all her subjects. When not focused on schoolwork or creating music, Phoenix honed her fencing skills, attending rigorous practices that led her to become the local junior fencing champion. From 2007 to 2011, Phoenix attended the University of Missouri, St. Louis, moving into an apartment with a friend. During this period, Phoenix began to show a different side of herself, struggling to balance her sheltered upbringing with the pressures of adulthood. She began arguing with her parents more often and engaging in risky behavior. While this change contrasted with the Phoenix they knew, neither Gloria nor Lawrence believed it was anything more than typical adolescent growing pains. That was until May 2011, when Phoenix returned home at her mother's insistence, and the tension in the house escalated. Over the following months, Phoenix's behavior grew increasingly erratic, culminating in the end of her longtime friendship with her neighbor, Akira. After a heated argument, Phoenix was forced to admit that something in her life was troubling her, a matter that neither Akira nor the Colden family could uncover. As the warmth of summer faded into the coldness of winter, Phoenix's crisis deepened. Those closest to her, including her parents and a few friends, noticed that she had become a completely different person. The vibrant, humorous, faith-driven woman who had once been eager to meet the world's expectations was now a shadow of her former self. Both Gloria and Lawrence Colden felt that their daughter was on the verge of returning to her true self, but they never had the chance to find out. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, Phoenix walked out of their home in Spanish Lake for what would be the final time, never to be seen or heard from again. The only trace left behind was her car, abandoned in the middle of St. Clair Avenue, with just a few personal belongings left in it. Phoenix had first met Akira in 2005 in the Spanish Lake neighborhood, and the two quickly became close friends. Because Phoenix was homeschooled, she would wait at the bus stop each day to greet Akira after school. However, Phoenix wasn't allowed to visit the Hogan household often, so her interactions with Akira and her mother, Martini, were limited to conversations on the front porch. The Hogans often saw Phoenix's parents as overly strict because of this. In the fall of 2007, Phoenix enrolls in the University of Missouri, St. Louis, eager to explore lifestyles differing from the religious-tempered world she knew growing up. Around the time of starting college classes, Phoenix meets a guy named Michael B. They soon enter a romantic relationship despite her parents' disapproval of him. Over the next few years, Phoenix and Michael B hide most of their intimacy from the Cauldron family. They move into an apartment together with the help of Phoenix's mother, Gloria, who signs the lease under the impression that her daughter is moving in with a female friend. Gloria proceeds to visit the flat multiple times in the duration Phoenix lives there, and not once sees a clue that alerts her a man is living there. At some point in 2010, Phoenix informs her childhood friend, Akira, back at home that she wants to leave Michael B, but isn't sure about how to go about it. Instead, she starts meeting other men. One of the men is another person named Michael, referred to as Cell Phone Mike. Phoenix heats up a second romantic relationship with Cell Phone Mike behind the back of Michael B. Around the same time, Phoenix purchases an alternative cell phone plan behind the back of her parents. She uses the burner phone to communicate with Cell Phone Mike and her phone from the family plan to upkeep her normal life with Gloria, Lawrence, and Michael B. In the months leading up to spring of 2011, Phoenix secretly steals money out of the Colden family's safe in their home. The money in question is in the form of savings bonds under Gloria Colden's name. Phoenix discreetly cashes these bonds at various points, pulling in around $2,500. What happens to this money is unknown. When May of 2011 arrives, Phoenix moves back in with her parents per their request after they decide paying for the apartment is financially difficult, and their house is technically closer than her apartment is to the university. The situation begins to unravel in the summer of 2011, when Phoenix has a mental breakdown in front of her friend Akira. Phoenix claims she has the feeling that she's being followed, specifically saying that an anonymous person or people are watching her and the Colton family in the park one day. It is a paranoid discussion with an unsettling foreshadowing in which Phoenix shares she has a feeling that something is after her and something is going to happen. On November 15, 2011, Phoenix records a selfie video on her phone while she sits in her car, expressing the extreme frustration she has with herself and the emotional crisis she's in. Phoenix appears distressed and on the verge of tears, saying things like she wishes she could start over. She also recites an altered version of the Serenity Prayer. During Thanksgiving break later in the month, Phoenix meets with an old friend from her teenage years, Tim Baker. She confides in him that despite telling people she's at the university, she never actually enrolled in classes that semester. Keeping the secret from her family, Tim knows about the second burner phone and realizes Phoenix is living a double life and feels like she's hiding something from him too. Not long afterwards, sometime at the end of November or early December, Phoenix has another fiery incident with Akira. This time she argues with her best friend about petty little issues regarding their friendship and Michael B. It escalates when Phoenix reveals she carries a 10-inch dagger knife stored in the driver's side door of her car. Akira thinks Phoenix is just trying to intimidate her and claims she's done nothing wrong. After Phoenix hints that she's going somewhere to get away, Akira claims this mental state is totally abnormal for Phoenix, and like Tim Baker, feels that her friend is hiding something. Throughout the first weeks of December, Phoenix makes an increasing number of phone calls to her original boyfriend, Michael B., via her family-planned cell phone. On December 17th, she engages in 10 separate phone conversations, ending with a 116-minute call, unknown as to what it is about and if it played a role in the mind-numbing mystery about to unfold. At 9:34 a.m. On December 18th, 2011, Phoenix makes a 2-minute phone call to her friend Rosie, again using a family-planned cell phone. 5 minutes later, at 9:41 a.m., Phoenix makes a 6-minute call to Michael B. on the same cell phone as before. At 11 a.m., Phoenix attends the morning service with her mother, Gloria, at their usual church. Phoenix performs in the handbell choir and appears like her normal self to the congregation's pastor, Mark Miller. After church, Phoenix makes the last recorded call on her family-planned cell phone to Michael B., a call that only lasts 1 minute with unknown details. Not much time passes before Phoenix and Gloria run an errand to the grocery store around 2 p.m. On the way home to Spanish Lake, Phoenix turns to Gloria and says, "Ma'am, we need to get back to the way we used to be." Gloria responds asking, "What do you mean, Phoenix?" And Phoenix says, "We just need to be more what we used to be like." Gloria figures the old version of her daughter is coming back. 5 minutes past 3 p.m. Later that afternoon, Felix walks past her father, silent yet determined. She hops into a black 1998 Chevy Blazer and backs out of the driveway. This is the last known sighting of Felix Colden. About 2.5 hours later at 5:27 p.m. East St. Louis Police Officer Perry receives a call about an abandoned car in the middle of the 900 block of St. Clair Avenue. Officer Perry arrives on the scene in 8 minutes at 9:35 p.m. and finds an empty black Chevy Blazer sitting in the middle of the road near a stop sign. Assuming the vehicle run out of gas, Officer Perry checks out the interior. He finds the engines not running, the lights are off, bearing no purse or phone inside. No sign of struggle and resting there like any normal parked car would, he runs the license plates to see if it comes up as a stolen car in the database, but produces no hits. He calls a local towing company and runs the VIN number confirming that the car was actually from Missouri and probably crossed state lines on a routine drive. Officer Perry enters the car's data into a nationwide car logging system, but the delay in the program causes the vehicle to remain absent from the National Impound Registry. Later in the evening, the car is taken into an Illinois car and truck impound lot, but the owners of the vehicle are not contacted. The next morning on December 19th, Gloria and Lawrence awake and immediately feel concerned for their daughter, who never stays out all night and hasn't been heard from since the previous afternoon. When Gloria calls law enforcement and provides Phoenix's date of birth, the police announce that because Phoenix is a legal adult and has only been gone less than 24 hours, there's no reason to believe she's missing. Gloria persists and informs the officers over the phone that Phoenix was in the 1998 Chevy Blazer, so they run a vehicle check. However, no red flags pop up in the system, despite the impound on 18th. Over the next couple of weeks, the Colton family searches endlessly for their daughter. They pass out flyers, call nearby hospitals and visit potential hiding spots around town. Gloria even calls multiple local news stations, but none of them air Phoenix's story or help spread awareness. At the end of December, Gloria and Lawrence are informed one of their vehicles has been impounded at an East St. Louis car lot. They rush across the Mississippi River to find their Chevy Blazer exactly how Officer Perry found it, strewn with odds and ends belonging to Phoenix, but showing no signs of conflict. Gloria feels Phoenix was most certainly not the one who put the car on Sinclair Avenue, while Lawrence gets a sense that Phoenix is ultimately okay. On New Year's Day 2012, authorities finally pick up the case and declare Phoenix Colden an official missing person. A little over a week later, on January 9th, Phoenix's profile is first reported by news outlets and is given special spotlight by Sean Greer Thomas on January 25th, who then accidentally shares false information about the state of the Chevy Blazer found on December 18th, leading viewers to believe Phoenix had been taken from the car with its engine still running and door ajar. In February of 2012, the Colden family hires a private investigator, Steve Foster, to find Phoenix. Along with the local police department, detectives interview all known suspects, including both of the Michael boyfriends, who are cleared after interrogation. This would be the only time either boyfriend spoke out about the case, and their transcripts have not been released. Steve Foster also discovers Phoenix's safe-stealing habits, which leads to the reveal of Phoenix Colden's second birth certificate under the name of Phoenix Reeves, her mother's maiden name. Over the next couple of years, tens of thousands of tips come in regarding potential sightings of Phoenix. However, none bear any real fruit. These false wolf cries force the Colden family into spending more money they had on PIs to track breadcrumb trails with dead ends, leaving the family no choice but to foreclose their home without any tangible hope. The police are unable to find any real clues or physical evidence either. In 2018, Oxygen Television Network videotapes a separate investigation into the disappearance of Phoenix with the original investigative reporter, Sean Greer Thomas, and a retired police deputy, Joe Delia. The two comb through the major points in the case and bring in a third private investigator, Dean Duke, to run a detailed database analysis of the second birth certificate of Phoenix. The system reveals only 4 matches in the United States. 3 of them are ruled out with complete profiles. However, one sticks out as peculiar. The final Phoenix Reeves match has no date of birth, no social security number, and no relatives, just an address for a house in Anchorage, Alaska that was active from January to June 2012. Joe and Dean traveled to Alaska and interviewed the neighbors around the address regarding Phoenix. However, none recognize her name from her missing posters. They eventually contact the woman now living in the house that was matched in the database, but the woman says that she's been the sole owner of the place since 2002 and has never seen or heard of Phoenix, either with the Reeves nor Colden surname. While both private investigators are convinced this suspicious profile is that of the real Phoenix Colden, they have little else to go on. This is the most recent development of the still frozen solid disappearance. When looking across the entirety of Phoenix's cold case, there are plenty of curious items that could play a major role in the investigation. The most significant piece of evidence that offers insight into Phoenix's mindset is a selfie video she recorded on November 15, 2011, just a month before her disappearance. While the full video has not been made public, several compelling quotes from Phoenix have been collected and added to the case file. In the video, she begins by mentioning that she was abandoned by an unnamed person or group. She follows with, "This is ridiculous. I just want to start over." She continues, expressing a sense of frustration. "I just feel like I can't start the new me over." After a brief pause, she adds, "I don't know. I've got to see things for what they are. You know, like instead of thinking about it like that, see things for what they are." Phoenix then trails off, speaking a few inaudible words before focusing on the camera and reciting a version of the Sarantai prayer. "Lord, please help me accept the things that won't change and that I won't change the things that I can't change." As the video progresses, Phoenix shares, "That's why I don't like talking to people when I'm mad or whatever, because I say stuff that I don't mean, and that's when you learn to hold your composure. I want people to take me seriously." Due to the poor sound quality and moments of mumbling, some parts of her speech are unclear. Investigators Sean Dree Thomas and Joe Delia brought the video to audio engineer Brian Kwaskin to enhance the audio and decipher the rest of the dialogue. After working on the audio, Kwaskin uncovers a part where Phoenix says, "I just want to be happy. I feel so stupid because I let myself go a little bit. I probably would have been in a better situation if I would have stuck with how I used to be." She then adds, "Might as well ride in the back with the cops all up in here. The only person that won't let me down is me." While it's unclear how much longer Phoenix continues her self-reflection, the video ends with her giving one final look into the camera and saying, "Bye." Throughout the conversation she has with herself, Phoenix takes plenty of long pauses looking outside the window with a somber, agitated demeanor. Her voice is mellow, soft, and sometimes indistinguishable, yet doesn't come across as calm. Rather, Phoenix sounds as if she's truly worried about the state she's in, consciously struggling with her life in that moment compared to the good-natured lifestyle she lived in prior. It's in these moments that Phoenix herself clarifies she has been a completely different person, for better or for worse. Some investigators theorize that Phoenix references a situation that puts her in legal trouble. All that she's hanging around a bad crowd of people who are pushing her to want out. Regardless, it's clear Phoenix is struggling with internal conflict, most likely as a result of external pressures. She seemed to rely on no one but herself, and her trust in the people around her is obviously deteriorating. Despite the tense atmosphere, however, Phoenix displays her sensitivity and cognitive ability to understand the world. She's attempting to decipher the present by working through the past to hopefully set up a brighter future. Sadly though, the timing of the video and being so close to the disappearance leads all involved to believe her crisis played a major role in the events that mysteriously unfolded. In the 7 years since Phoenix's cold case has entered the public sphere, the most discussed theory revolves around a possible human trafficking incident. When her disappearance was first reported, a rumor started that the 1998 Chevy Blazer driven by Phoenix was discovered on the 900 block of St. Clair Avenue with the engine running, the lights on, and the driver's side door swung open. This version of the story implies that Phoenix was most likely taken out of the car by a second party, and the Chevy was untouched. So who could have kidnapped Phoenix from her vehicle with sudden force? Well, it just so happens that the 900 block of St. Clair Avenue is positioned right next to the Interstate 70 highway, branded as the human trafficking highway of America. Not only that, but the areas surrounding St. Clair Avenue in East St. Louis are notorious for high levels of crime, gang and drug-related activity, and human trafficking itself. Thus, multiple theories suggest Phoenix was driving in East St. Louis for whatever suspect business she had involved herself in months prior, was targeted by a group of pimps or trafficking operatives and taken away while at the stop sign and kidnapped into the underground oblivion. Human trafficking survivor Kat Summers believes the case had earmarks of usual trafficking situations, again pointing to the state of the car and degraded status of East St. Louis street life. Katie Rhodes, the founder of Healing Action, also felt like Phoenix was most likely pulled into the human trafficking sector. Although she claims Phoenix went into it with a sense of autonomy, Katie explained that pimps are master persuaders, often seducing their victims with the promise of freedom away from the control of parents. That would definitely be the case for Phoenix, who was unhappy living back at home and constantly fighting with their mother. If she was enticed to enter the realms of prostitution in exchange for independence, the pimp would have worked quickly to disorientate Phoenix and strip her personal life away. To add fuel to the fire, a woman from the local St. Louis Mothers of Missing Children group claims that in 2017, she received a message that included a link and a picture of Phoenix associated with a suspicious escort website. However, when investigators used the link, it directed them to a fake Facebook page with Phoenix's picture in the profile image, proving to be nothing more than a cruel hoax. This wasn't the only alleged sighting of Phoenix throughout the years though. In March of 2014, an old friend, Kelly Fronert, reportedly sees Phoenix in a plane going home from Las Vegas. Kelly was seated on her flight during boarding and looked up, catching a glimpse of a woman who appeared to be Phoenix with a group of women staring straight ahead. Kelly called her name, to which the woman looked up immediately and asked Kelly if she looked like someone. Kelly responded with, "Yeah, you look like my friend Phoenix." but this woman kept going, never engaging with Kelly again. She was wearing a zipped-up jacket, nice jewelry, along with women all bearing the same likeness. There were 2 men in the group with them, pro football player types in the age range of 35 to 40 years old. When they landed in St. Louis, Kelly disembarked and went to Southwest Airlines service counter saying she saw a missing person on the flight. Police came and combed through the airport, but never found the woman thought to be Phoenix or her crew members. Kelly is adamant the woman was Phoenix Colden, rating her confidence a 9 out of 10 during the Oxygen documentary series. There isn't much evidence to refute the possibility that Phoenix disappeared into the human trafficking trade due to the geographic tendencies and history of East St. Louis, yet it's hard to consider this when the state of the Chevy showed zero signs of struggle. While there were a few odds and ends strewn about the interior of the car, neither Phoenix's purse nor cell phone was found, unlike the original report stated. The car was abandoned rather than broken into, and unless Phoenix was taken somewhere, and the car was dumped afterwards, it's unlikely Phoenix was forced out. This then leads people to believe Phoenix was lured away by someone she knew and murdered. St. Louis, Missouri is a top 5 city for violent crime in America, and many sleuths point to the boyfriend situation and the secret nature of a double life outside of Spanish Lake. Michael B. was thoroughly investigated by police and early private detectives, and all parties are convinced he is innocent. While his alibis are known, Cell Phone Mike also makes sense as a suspect. In fact, Cell Phone Mike actually had a restraining order against him by a separate ex-girlfriend, who claimed he was both emotionally and physically violent. Not only this, but during Christmas time of 2011, a week after Phoenix disappeared, the ex-girlfriend states that Cell Phone Mike took special interest in missing person cases around the area, specifically checking up on the status of Phoenix's case after authorities reported it official. When the ex-girlfriend confronted Cell Phone Mike about these interests, he said Phoenix had been a customer of the convenience store he worked at, ending with a shouting match in which he asked, "Why are you worried about someone that's dead?" The ex-girlfriend has since declared she is unsure if Cell Phone Mike was just assuming or knew for sure. Even with the 2 Michaels cleared by police, a potential murder makes sense when considering all of Phoenix's bank accounts, cell phone records, and social media posts came to an abrupt halt the day she vanished. She felt like she was being followed for months leading up to the disappearance, and saw darkness on her horizon. The video she recorded stemmed from a hypothetical sticky situation in which she found herself in trouble involving the police and more than likely a larger unknown number of people. Taking it all into account, it makes sense to believe Phoenix's involvement with folks outside of her known social circle led her to illegal doings. Her use of the burner phone was used to navigate these operations, and on December 18th, she went out to resolve a dispute, ending up a homicide victim at the hands of these anonymous connections. All that being said, police are aware of the second cell phone and haven't reported it as a piece connecting Phoenix to any criminal organization. And while it is possible that because the search is ongoing, law enforcement cannot unveil case details, there's just not enough observable evidence to indicate foul play is involved. There's no blood, no wanted suspects, and no DNA in the Chevy Blazer that belongs to anyone other than Phoenix, Gloria, or Lawrence Colden. Nevertheless, no theory can be completely ruled out with the bizarre events surrounding Phoenix's vanishing and life as a whole. Living 2 lives, with one being a complete mystery to the people investigators have access to, makes extracting leads and following clues unnaturally tedious and borderline impossible. Absorbing all of the information, interviews, and intelligence provided across the board by multiple private investigators, we've concluded that Phoenix Colden up and left Spanish Lake on her own accord with the help of friends, at first using her pseudonym, Phoenix Reeves, and the alternative birth certificate before building a completely new identity and dissolving into society under a new independent position of power. First, let's discuss the abandoned Chevy Blazer. The contents of the car, mostly junk and random garments, leaving no signs of illicit activity or foul play. The collection agency notice regarding Phoenix's unpaid burner phone bill that was discovered makes people question why she would leave it behind so carelessly. But ultimately, it wouldn't matter because the phone was still under her name and easily accessible by authorities with investigative abilities. The vehicle itself looked parked and planted from first sight, according to Officer Perry, and was most likely used as a decoy maneuver by Phoenix or whoever was helping her leave. Putting the Chevy in East St. Louis would make it seem like something criminal encountered Phoenix and lead searchers on a wild goose chase, when really, it was more than likely camouflage. Once the car was set up, Phoenix most likely had another person drive her away or had another car at the ready. In addition, there's a chance that Interstate 70 being so close as the trafficking highway of the US was merely a coincidence. In reality, it being a nearby escape route for a quick departure. It's also important to note that East St. Louis is across state lines in Illinois, which would later prove to throw a wrench in the initial search for Phoenix and the vehicle within the automobile database. The second key to the maze is Phoenix's immense critical thinking skills and subtle resourcefulness. Known associates of Phoenix described her as able to make friends with just about anyone, allowing her to adapt to a variety of situations and befriend people with specific sets of services. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Phoenix met friends of friends, who could assist with leaving the community and restarting an anonymous life. Now, who these suspects might be and to the degree of their craft is unknown, but Phoenix did have a head start with 2 birth certificates. Using the Phoenix Reeves document for secret plans wouldn't be tracked right away at all and would buy her precious time. She could make purchases, apply for a new social security number, and access any number of resources outside of the Golden Legacy. She was obviously smart enough to hide a second cell phone plan from her family and some of her friends, and could have had any number of other phones or communication methods. Remember, she was also intermittently stealing savings bonds from her family safe before moving back home, a potential method of collecting funds for her future departure. When the 2 private investigators, Joe Delia and Dean Duke, discovered the Phoenix Reeves identification address in Anchorage, Alaska, they visited the neighborhood, but came away empty-handed. Apparently, the woman who lived at the address under Phoenix Reeves owned the property during the months when Phoenix was linked to it from January to June 2012. However, this woman had never rented it out since purchasing it in 2002 and never saw anyone who looked like Phoenix during her 25-year residency. Yet, something isn't right about this anomaly. It just so happens that Phoenix Reeves' profile had 0 information points, except for an address that was dated just 1 month after Phoenix disappeared and appeared to be a sensible runaway location. Nobody in Anchorage would recognize Phoenix if she did indeed travel there to hide or plan a further identity transformation, and would serve as an excellent middle ground between the United States and starting anew in a foreign place like Japan. It also can't be ruled out that Phoenix paid off the woman who owned the house on record. Either way, we believe there's something very suspicious about Anchorage, Alaska, and concur she was definitely there at some point after her vanishing. In addition, many friends and connections to Phoenix have been less than welcoming to reporters, investigators, and anyone looking for answers. While they haven't been necessarily silent, a lot of her friends simply do not want to talk. In a sense, this could be analyzed as guilt behavior, but we feel that the guilt comes from their role in helping Phoenix, not hurting her. To pull off a feat like running away and becoming invisible, one would need help from the outside. Phoenix could have been using her new acquaintances as assistants in disappearing, including someone like Michael B. Their phone conversations increased in the weeks leading up to December 18th and ended with an abnormally long 116-minute call on December 17th. We theorized the 2-hour talk was a final discussion about the master plan, and the 1-minute call on 18th was Phoenix altering the plan's initiation, seeing as though it was her final call on the family plan phone. Again, it's possible more calls were made on the burner phone, but without those records, it cannot be stated with 100% certainty. Finally, when drawing this conclusion, we must address Phoenix's emotional and mental state at the time of December 2011. Multiple friends described Phoenix as unlike her normal self. She was agitated, displeased, and uncomfortable. Her relationship with her mother became untenable at times, ending with arguments and disputes, but various topics, as Phoenix spaced further and further away at church. Not to mention, Phoenix was constantly looking over her shoulder, regretting decisions in the past that took her down a path of present complications. Most telling of all was Phoenix's spoken wishes to start her life over, to reset her problems and return to the old version of herself. It's quite possible that she tried to do so in between November 15th, December 18th, with a couple of clues hinting of such efforts. However, she couldn't shake the shadow of darkness that loomed over her. As her friendship with Akira faltered and her paranoia grew, Phoenix became a product of an extremely strict upbringing, one that shielded her from real-world challenges and hindered her social development. She longed to expand her knowledge and experience life beyond the rigid rules set by the Colden household, but her desires were consistently dismissed by her parents. This gradually eroded her relationship with Gloria and Lawrence, ultimately making it easier for her to distance herself from the religious conservative identity everyone knew her by. Leaving, though likely not an easy choice, seemed necessary in her eyes, a way to escape the burdens that had turned life into an ongoing struggle. That being said, the case of Phoenix Colden is a deeply perplexing one, and every lead must be pursued. One of the main reasons we are sharing her story is the lack of national attention it received at the time of her disappearance in 2011 and 2012, which resulted in valuable time lost in the search. Gloria and Lawrence had to foreclose their home due to mounting investigation costs, and are now desperate for their daughter's case to gain wider exposure. They fear her files will be forgotten. Therefore, we are doing everything we can to keep the flame of hope alive, hoping that Phoenix will eventually be found. This is also the second case where our subject has a link to Anchorage, Alaska, a complete coincidence that only became apparent after our research into these cases. If any viewers are local to the area, please stay alert for any clues or leads related to the profiles of Trevor Deely, Felix Colden, or Phoenix Reeves. Although it may seem unlikely, you never know what might surface. Regardless, we must remember Phoenix Colden for the extraordinary woman she was, a brilliant fencer, a source of compassion and vibrant energy, who had the ability to make others laugh while sparking curiosity in culture, academics, and art. She was a talented musician, skilled in playing instruments such as the guitar and piano. In fact, Gloria's piano remains untouched, gathering dust, waiting for the girl who expressed herself so beautifully for 23 years to return. The piano waits for Phoenix Colden, just as we continue to fight the uphill battle in solving the mystery of her disappearance and the events at St. Clair Avenue. Moving on to the next case. Dorothy Lynn. On October 27, 1997, Michigan State Police officers were called to an area near Fox Farm Road in Manistee County after a report of a deceased, unclothed woman who seemed to have washed up on shore. The only clue to her identity was one earring. An autopsy concluded that the woman had drowned, and it appeared to be an accidental death. In September 2020, detectives with the Michigan State Police, Cadillac Post, and the department's Missing Persons Coordination Unit revisited the case and decided to exhume the woman for advanced DNA testing. Bone samples were sent to Astria Forensics under the DNA Doe Project for Forensic Genetic Genealogy. In July 2021, a possible familial match was identified. The DNA Doe Project provided potential leads, which were submitted to the Michigan State Police for verification. The connection linked the remains to the Ting family in Aroostook, Maine. Familial DNA reference samples from a potential brother were collected for further analysis. Finally, on January 9, 2023, the Michigan State Police identified the Jane Doe as 26-year-old Dorothy Lynn Thingricker. Dorothy had last been seen on October 2, 1997, at 12:30 p.m. by officers from the St. Francis Police Department in Wisconsin. At that time, she had not been reported missing, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The following day, an abandoned vehicle was discovered nearby, with its license plate registered to a missing/endangered person report filed by the Chicago Police Department. Investigators are now working to determine whether Dorothy's drowning was accidental, a suicide, or the result of foul play. Moving on to the next case. Florence Charleston. On October 26, 1978, the Pershing County Sheriff's Office was notified about the discovery of human remains found in Pershing County, Nevada, approximately 13 miles west of Imlay near Scosa Road. Officers responded to the scene and uncovered the remains, which were inside a garment bag buried in a shallow grave. Several pieces of clothing were found inside the bag, including a dark green sweater with a white safety pin on the front, dark green trousers, and a long-sleeved pink sweater. The remains were transported to the Washoe Medical Center in Reno, Nevada, where an autopsy was conducted. The medical examiner determined that the remains belonged to a Caucasian female, aged 40 to 50 at the time of her death. While the exact cause of death could not be determined due to the condition of the body, foul play was suspected. Unfortunately, there were no identifying details found on the victim's body. In May of 1979, the Pershing County Sheriff's Office requested assistance from the Nevada Department of Public Safety's Investigative Division, leading to an extensive investigation to identify the woman. The investigation included the submission of dental records for comparison, but the woman's identity remained a mystery. Investigators, with the assistance of the FBI, worked to gather identifying information from the clothing found with the remains. A mitochondrial DNA profile was obtained, and the case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, NAMUS. Despite following up on numerous tips and comparing missing persons reports, no significant leads were established. As a result of these challenges, the woman remained unidentified and came to be known as the 1978 Imlay Jane Doe. For over 44 years, she would remain unidentified. Then in March 2022, investigators, along with NAMUS, enlisted the assistance of Othram in hopes of identifying the unknown woman. Funding for the advanced DNA testing and forensic genetic genealogy used in this case was provided by NAMUS, a national clearinghouse that assists the criminal justice community with the investigation and resolution of missing, unidentified, and unclaimed persons cases across the United States and its territories. Forensic evidence was submitted to Othram's laboratory in the Woodlands, Texas, and Othram scientists used forensic-grade genome sequencing to develop a comprehensive DNA profile for the unidentified woman. Othram's in-house genealogy team used the profile to develop investigative leads that were returned to law enforcement investigators. David Middleman, the CEO at Othram, said that allows you to find people who are even remotely related. It may not be the person that you have over for the holidays, but it will be a genetic relative, maybe a third or fourth cousin. Investigators were then able to determine that the unidentified woman is 67-year-old Florence Charleston of Cleveland, Ohio. Detective Sean Coster said the genealogy profile that was processed through these remains was successfully matched to a couple in Ohio. Nevada State Police ended up finding and testing the DNA of Florence's granddaughter, Donna Taylor, and in March of 2023 found a 100% familial match between Donna and the remains found near Imlay, Nevada. When the detective first contacted me, I thought it was a joke, Donna said. A subsequent investigation revealed that Florence moved to Portland, Oregon sometime in the early 1970s, and family members lost contact with her around 1978. Relatives of Florence say she was a fun-loving person who was easy to be around. Diane Liggett, Florence's niece, said, "Every kid should have an aunt like her. We all used to tell stories in our family for years, how much fun she was growing up with her. We all missed her when she went up to Portland and basically disappeared shortly thereafter." Florence was born in 1911 and was happily married until her husband passed away. Her granddaughter, Donna Taylor, said after she lost her husband, she seemed to become a little needy with men. Donna Taylor was still a child when Florence moved from their hometown of Cleveland, Ohio to an apartment building on Southeast Milwaukee Avenue in Portland with her boyfriend. Donna said the guy that she relocated to Portland with, he had contacted us saying that they had gone to Hawaii to look for a condo to purchase. When they returned to the Portland airport, she ran away from him. I honestly think she ended up homeless and lost her life on the streets. That's how I managed to cope with it. Donna recalled that the last time she spoke to her grandmother was over the phone in 1977, when she was a junior in high school. This was a year before Florence's body was discovered. Once everything is resolved, I plan to bring her back to Cleveland for a proper burial. I need her here. She has been stuck in limbo all this time. I will lay her to rest next to her son, my father, in the cemetery. The investigation into Florence's disappearance is still ongoing. Anyone with any information regarding the case is urged to contact the Nevada Department of Public Safety Investigation Division at 775-684-7456. Moving on to the next case. Don Henry and Kevin Ives. On August 23, 1987, at around 4 a.m., the engineer of a Union Pacific locomotive traveling toward Little Rock, Arkansas, spotted two motionless bodies lying on the tracks. Despite the engineer blowing the horn, the bodies did not move. The train, traveling at over 50 miles per hour, was unable to stop in time before hitting them. When local police arrived at 4:40 a.m., the bodies were identified as 16-year-old Don Henry and 17-year-old Kevin Ives, best friends and popular seniors at Bryan High School. They had been out hunting late that night, and a rifle and a flashlight were found near their bodies. It's believed they were hunting using the spotlighting method, which involves blinding prey before shooting. However, witnesses aboard the train reported seeing the boys partially covered by a green tarp, but police never found any trace of it at the scene. The engineer later claimed he had informed authorities about the tarp, but the police denied this, marking the start of several inconsistencies in what is widely regarded as a mishandled investigation by the Saline County Sheriff's Department. The state medical examiner, Dr. Malik, ruled the deaths as accidental, attributing them to the boys having consumed large amounts of marijuana. Dr. Malik suggested the boys had smoked the equivalent of 20 marijuana cigarettes and then fallen asleep on the tracks, but both families struggled to believe this explanation. They questioned how the boys could have lain side by side on the tracks, and how they could have slept through the sound of the approaching train and its horn. Determined to uncover the truth, the parents hired a private investigator, but he encountered significant resistance. The investigator discovered that the hospital where the boys were taken had no record of their admission. Additionally, staff members accused Dr. Malik of having previously falsified autopsy records. The investigator also found notes from emergency responders indicating that the blood of the boys seemed to lack oxygen, raising the possibility that they had already been dead when the train hit. In March of 1988, Dr. James Garrett from San Antonio offered a second opinion, expressing doubts about the initial autopsy results. He noted that the only reliable way to test for drugs was through mass spectrometry, a test that had not been performed by Dr. Malik. Despite these concerns, Saline County Sheriff James Steed Jr. maintained that there was no evidence to suggest the boys' deaths were anything other than an accident. In response to this, Linda Ives, Kevin's mother, publicly criticized the sheriff's department for its handling of the case. As a result, Sheriff Steed made a deal with Dan Harmon, the lawyer representing both families, in February of 1988. If the parents withdrew their criticism off the sheriff's departments, they would see to it that a proper investigation was launched into the boys' deaths. The second autopsy was carried out by Georgia medical examiner, Dr. Joseph Burton. He found the equivalent of between 1 and 3 marijuana cigarettes in the boys' systems combined, a far cry from Dr. Malik's initial estimation of around 20. Don's shirt had evidence of stab wounds to its back, while Kevin's skull appeared to have been crushed likely by the butt of his own rifle. As a result, the grand jury ruled the deaths as definite homicide. But despite this, Sheriff Steed refused to put money into the investigation. He was also found to have lied about where he sent the boys' clothing so it could be tested. It was meant to have been sent to the FBI, but instead he sent it to the Arkansas State's crime lab. It was no surprise to anybody that following his poor handling of the case, James Steed Jr. was not re-elected for sheriff. In the days following this defeat, one of Dan Harmon's informants who was asked to take aerial photographs of the scene by Harmon was murdered. This was just one in a long string of murders possibly connected to the case. 4 men who had been called to testify before the grand jury were found dead either from murder or suspicious accidents, while another one disappeared. At least 3 of these men had links to the drug underworld of Arkansas. Due to the bungled investigation, there are not many suspects in the case of Kevin Ives and Don Henry. 1 week before the pair passed away, a man wearing military fatigues was spotted not far from the train tracks. When a police officer approached him, the man opened fire before disappearing into the night. On the night that the boys were found on the tracks, a similar-looking man wearing the same kind of clothing was spotted nearby. This man has never been identified, and it is unknown if he has any connection to the case. There was one local witness who did come forward with information possibly pertaining to the case. On the night of the boys' slayings, the witness saw 2 police officers beating 2 boys senseless in a store parking lot before tossing them into a truck and driving away. It's unknown if these boys were Don and Kevin or whether they had any connection to the case at all. Linda Ives, Kevin's mother, who has been extremely outspoken throughout the investigation, has stated her belief that the deaths are linked to drug trafficking. This theory involves the boys stumbling upon a drug drop from an airplane, suggesting that the boys were killed for stumbling upon something that they shouldn't have. A prosecutor named Richard Garrett, who had the bodies exhumed for a second autopsy, suspected this theory to be true. He claimed there was a lot of drug trafficking through the city of Bryant, which is connected to several other states. He has also stated his belief that a police cover-up has taken place in regards to the case of Kevin and Don. Then on June 25, 1984, 2 young men in Ogden, Oklahoma were also run over by a train. Billy Don Haneline, 21, and Dennis Decker, 26, were found lying on the tracks side by side. While there was a small amount of alcohol in their systems, it was nowhere near enough to cause them to pass out. Their deaths have also been ruled as an accident. 1 month later, a meth lab was found about 1.5 miles from where the bodies were located. While this case was eventually reopened, no evidence of any foul play was found, and the official conclusion remains that they fell asleep on the tracks. Although this case may have nothing to do with that of Henry and Don, it shares eerie similarities nonetheless. In 1994, a video called The Clinton Chronicles was released linking Bill Clinton to various crimes, including the deaths of Kevin and Don. The film propelled forward conspiracy theories which involved Clinton allegedly using the Menard Intermountain Municipal Airport to smuggle drugs, guns, and money from Central America. 2 years later, in 1996, Linda Ives was involved in a film named Obstruction of Justice, which detailed the fumbled investigation and cover-up of an alleged drug ring in Saline County. The video also named some people who were possibly implicit in this alleged cover-up. A year later, in 1997, Dan Harmon was convicted of racketeering, conspiracy, extortion, and drug possession with intent to distribute, and was sentenced to 11 years in prison. Tragically, in recent years, things have not improved for Linda or the other family members of Don and Kevin. In 2016, Linda filed a lawsuit citing a violation of the Freedom of Information Act by local, state, and federal authorities. She accused them of refusing to meet the record requests she had filed pertaining to the boys' case, and added that the documents she had been given were so heavily redacted that she couldn't make sense of them. However, her case was thrown out in 2019. The most recent development came in 2018 when a former pro wrestler named Billy Jack Haynes came forward to say that he had witnessed the executions. He claimed that Don and Kevin were slain after stumbling upon a drug deal involving corrupt police and high-level U.S. politicians, adding that he was once involved in a cocaine smuggling network that stretched back to the Medellin cartel. According to Haynes, he was present during a drug drop and claims he provided muscle, though he denies being involved in the executions themselves. He asserts that he helped move and dispose of the bodies. Many of the individuals mentioned in his confession have either been murdered or convicted on drug charges. While this account has provided some hope, others find Haynes' confession unreliable. The former wrestler is known for inserting himself into various situations and promoting conspiracy theories. Haynes has previously claimed to know the truth behind other deaths, such as that of James Michael Frank, a judge and director of the New Mexico Corrections Department, who was killed in 1989. As a result, many people question Haynes' credibility as a witness. Although the case was featured on the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries in 1988, and a book was written about it by investigative journalist Mara Leverett, the murders of Don Henry and Kevin Ives have faded from public attention. Their families continue to seek justice, and the case remains unsolved. Moving on to the next case. Charles Horvath Allen. One of the most chilling discoveries that detectives can make while investigating a case is a letter from the killer or someone involved in the crime, especially when the sender remains anonymous. Charles Horvath Allen was born in Canada on August 21, 1968, but grew up primarily in the UK. While little is known about his early years, he seemed to have a carefree and content childhood. As an adult, he appeared to lead a life free from significant stress or hardship. In the spring of 1989, Charles traveled to Ontario to visit his father and godfather before embarking on a backpacking journey across Canada. His plan was to explore and visit his birthplace before meeting his mother in Hong Kong to celebrate both his 21st birthday and her 40th. On May 3rd, Charles arrived in Kelowna, British Columbia. During his travels, the 20-year-old had stayed in various places, including local hostels, friends' couches, and a few camping sites, with one of the more memorable stops being tiny town tents and trailer campsites. Charles had also registered with various student employment agencies throughout May. His last confirmed sighting was on May 26th, when he was seen cashing a check at a bank in Orchard Park Shopping Center. Although he was supposed to meet his mother and stepfather in Hong Kong in August, his plane ticket had not been booked yet. The last time his parents heard from him was via fax on May 11, 1989, and after that, there was no contact. As a result, his mother was unable to purchase his ticket to Hong Kong. When Charles went missing, he left behind all his belongings, including his tent. Despite Denise Allen, his mother, reaching out to the Kelowna RCMP for help in locating her son, Charles wasn't officially reported as a missing person until August 10th. In the interim, Denise made several calls to the RCMP, but they refused to label Charles as missing since he was over 18, stating, "If he didn't want to call his mom, he didn't have to." When Denise traveled to Canada to put up missing posters and search for him on her own, she was contacted by a young woman named Joanne Zeebroff. Joanne claimed to have met Charles in May and allowed him to stay in her Kelowna home. She described him as charming and mentioned that he often spoke fondly of his family, showing off photos he had taken with them. Joanne also reported seeing him months later at a nightclub called Live Wire in August. However, this sighting is unverified. In July of 1990, the RCMP searched the tiny town campsites. They retrieved some of his clothing and his shaving bag from a resident there. Prior to this, Denise had visited the site herself and had been given a few of her son's items, including a rosary, red paper Bible, and a leather boot strap. The manager who gave Denise the items claimed they had been in a storage shed for about a year, but that his tents, other belongings, photos, and passports had all been thrown away in the spring of 1990. Again, it's unclear why these steps were taken. The case seems to have been very poorly handled, as the RCMP failed to note Charles as a missing person for 2 months, and then took a year to search his last known whereabouts before finally failing to secure all his items, some of which may have indicated where he had gone or what he had planned to do on the day he went missing. The actions of the campground seem hasty too, but they were perhaps unaware that Charles had been reported missing. Although, it's unknown why they held on to 3 random items as opposed to the 20-year-old's ID and photographs. In March of 1992, Denise took a trip to Canada where she received 2 anonymous letters, both of which were delivered by a taxi while she stayed at the Pandacy Inn Motel. The writer of the letters claimed that Charles had been partying with a group of people, but he ended up in a fight and was subsequently killed. They added that his body had been dumped in Lake Okanagan. Local volunteer divers went into the lake and searched for 3 days before eventually being aided by the Vancouver-based International Sea Search, who brought submersible cameras. The team searched beneath the old floating bridge for a further 3 days, with the RCMP joining on day 5 out of the 6-day search. On Friday, April 3, 1992 at 10:14 a.m., International Sea Search divers located a male body and called the RCMP, who arrived on the scene shortly afterwards. Their divers retrieved the body, but it wasn't long before it was identified as belonging to an elderly man who'd taken his own life 7 years before. The second letter, which arrived for Denise, claimed that the authorities were looking on the wrong side of the bridge, but nothing further was ever found in the water. Then in 1995, a decomposed body was found in the logging country around Kelowna. The family were initially unaware that a body had been found, and it had been brought to their attention by friends who had seen the story being reported on the news. However, 6 weeks later, Charles's family were told it was not their missing son. Over the years, Denise has made frequent trips to Kelowna to search for her missing son, meeting with the authorities, handing out posters and talking with local residents, searching every avenue she can for answers. She eventually sold her successful hair and beauty business to help fund the search. In 2010, she rented billboard space so that she could advertise her son's disappearance and appeal for help. But this led nowhere. That same year, the Serious Crime Unit of the RCMP listed Charles as deceased. Denise told news outlets, "How and by what means I don't know, but something terrible happened to him that prevented him from calling home. I want to know where his remains are. I want him to be laid to rest with his beloved Nana in Cambridge, England." Authorities believed at least for some time that Charles may have vanished voluntarily, since Joanne Zebroff claimed to have seen him several months after he lost contact with Denise. He also reportedly told 2 of his relatives that he thought about disappearing off the face of the earth, and that his mother would never find him. Additionally, there were unconfirmed sightings of Charles hitchhiking throughout Canada as late as 1992. However, Denise Allen believes her son died around the time she last heard from him. The RCMP have said they are open-minded about the disappearance, and that the file will remain open until Charles is located. In 2015, Denise said that her trip to Canada that year would likely be her last due to her health and finances. Charles's father, godfathers and grandparents have all passed away in the years since he vanished. In August of 2020, Charles was declared officially dead under the UK's Presumption of Death Act 2013. That same month, Locate International, which is made up of a team of ex-detectives and specialists who aim to help solve missing persons cases, agreed to take over the case. Criminology students from Leeds Beckett University are now assisting in the search for Charles. Denise has expressed relief at finally receiving help in the investigation. Speaking to the Missing podcast, she shared, "I know there are people in Kelowna who know the fate of my young son, but unfortunately, they are too afraid to come forward. I don't understand why when they can remain anonymous, but I don't live there. I don't walk in their shoes." Charles Horvath Allen was last seen on May 26, 1989, at the Orchard Park Shopping Centre in Kelowna, British Columbia, Canada. At the time, he was 20 years old and was scheduled to fly to Hong Kong in August to meet his mother and stepfather and celebrate his birthday. Charles is described as being 6 feet tall with dark brown hair and brown eyes. He weighed around 175 pounds at the time of his disappearance and had a tattoo of a skull with a mohawk on his right arm. If he is still alive, he would be 51 years old. Anyone with information regarding the disappearance of Charles is encouraged to contact Central Okanagan Crime Stoppers anonymously at 1-800-222-8477. Moving on to the next case. Asenath Duquette. Asenath Duquette, an 8-year-old girl, lived with her parents in Upper Arlington, Ohio. She was a 3rd grader at Barrington Elementary School and was affectionately called Cindy by her friends and family. Described as friendly but shy, she was eagerly anticipating summer vacation, which was only a week away. On June 3, 1980, Asenath and her classmates were kept 10 minutes after school as punishment for talking during a lesson. Around 3:10 p.m., Asenath left the school alone to walk home, a route she had taken many times before. Her home was about a mile away. She would walk from Barrington Road to Waltham Road, then turn onto Malvern Road. She was last seen by 2 classmates at 3:20 p.m. on Waltham Road, but she never made it home. When Asenath failed to return home, her parents first contacted her teacher, who confirmed that Asenath had left school about an hour earlier. Sensing something was wrong, her parents immediately called the police around 4:30 p.m. A widespread search for the missing girl began. At approximately 7:30 p.m. that same evening, a police officer discovered her body in a drainage ditch near the intersection of Riverside Drive and Waltham Road, just a block away from her home. She had been strangled and suffered blunt force trauma to the head from a 20-pound rock found at the crime scene. An autopsy later confirmed that she had also been sexually assaulted. Less than a month before Asenatha's death, on May 7, 1980, another girl from Truma Elementary School had been attacked while walking home. Around 3:30 p.m., she and a classmate were followed by a man on a red bicycle. The girls eventually split up, and while cutting through a yard to reach Riverside Drive, the victim was grabbed from behind. When she tried to scream, the man choked her and left her unconscious. The attacker then fled the scene for unknown reasons. Her clothing had been disturbed when she regained consciousness, and that she had been moved several feet away from the scene of the attack to a more secluded area. The victim did not see the face of the attacker as she was attacked from behind. A witness described the man on the red bike to be between the ages of 15-20 years old, then with straight black hair and an olive complexion. The red 10-speed bicycle that the would-be killer had ridden had no fenders and 3 reflectors, an orange one on the front wheel, a red one on the rear wheel, and another hanging from the back seat. Police believe that the same man who was responsible for Seneth's murder was responsible for the prior attack, as they both occurred at the same time of day and in the same area, and both attacks were sexually motivated. During their questioning, a witness reported to have seen a clean-cut man in a white t-shirt carrying a large object in both hands on the day that Aseneth was murdered. The witness also reported to have seen a red bicycle parked nearby. Another witness helped police make a composite sketch of the killer. Despite this, no leads could be found. On that day, the weather was sunny and warm, and while many people were out and about, no one saw anything. Aseneth was killed in an open area next to First Community Village, a retirement home for the elderly, but they did not see or hear anything either. Based on this, police theorized that Aseneth was abducted and taken someplace else, raped and killed, and then dumped in the ditch. Over the years, police would receive several tips and would interview hundreds of suspects, but to no avail. The case would eventually grow cold. Aseneth's murder led to the creation of the community-based group The Long Walk Home, the Aseneth Ducat Project, consisting of local kids who remembered Aseneth's murder. The group regularly personally investigated Aseneth's case and helped police in solving it. On August 11, 2022, the Upper Arlington Police Division announced that they had finally solved the case. They named Brent L. Strutner as the person responsible for Aseneth's murder. Strutner was 20 years old at the time of Aseneth's murder and lived locally. He graduated from Upper Arlington High School in 1979. He would go on to commit suicide in Columbus, Ohio when he was 24 years old in 1984. Investigators say Strutner had been a suspect in the case for quite a while, but they did not have sufficient evidence to name him. In 2008, police sent DNA found at the crime scene for DNA testing at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Soon the DNA profile created proved to match Brant Strutner. However, even though police had linked Strutner to the crime more than a decade prior, they did not want to release information until they were absolutely sure. Police Sergeant Brian McKean said, "We wanted to make sure all the pieces and parts were tied together before we released anything." Strutner was a suspect long before we had the ability to identify him. Detectives re-examined all the evidence in the case and tried to figure out if Strutner had acted alone or if he had an accomplice. One of Strutner's associates, Robert, also known as Chris Winchester, had been attacking young women in the Columbus and Ohio State University areas at the time of the murder, including an attempted abduction of a young girl on Henderson Road just months after the murder. Winchester was later found guilty and served prison time for the Henderson Road crime. Although he was investigated in connection with Aseneth's murder, the police could not find enough evidence to link him to the crime. Despite re-examining every piece of evidence from the crime scene, no additional physical artifacts suggested the involvement of another person. The case was officially closed after 42 years. However, members of the advocacy group, The Long Walk Home, believe the case remains open. They released a statement on the status of the case and its developments. The statement read, "We applaud the countless hours and hard work that led to the confirmation of Brett Strutner's involvement in the crime. However, after reviewing all of the evidence, it is reasonable to conclude that Brett Strutner did not act alone. Our mission will continue based on this belief, as long as the Duckett family and our community continue to support our efforts to bring all involved to justice. Thanks for watching.
you.